They laughed when the janitor offered to fill in after their prodigy fainted backstage. Dust on her sleeves, old sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. "Let her try," the headmaster scoffed. "We're already humiliated." But when her fingers touched the keys, flawless, fluid, furious, no one in the room moved. Not even the donors. Because they were hearing something impossible. Not notes, not music, but a language only she spoke, and the school had spent years mocking. 3 weeks earlier, Amira moved like a shadow through the marble halls of St. Elora Conservatory. Her mop glided across the tiles with rhythm, though no one noticed. Her name tag said facilities, and most faculty never read past that. If they'd ever asked, they might have learned she had once stood under stage lights, not fluorescents, and had been introduced with ovations, not walkie-talkie static. Amira kept her head down as she passed a classroom where students were practicing Chopin. One hit a wrong note, and the teacher stopped cold, barked a correction, and played it himself. Amira didn't flinch, but under her breath, she hummed the correct passage, with a subtle phrasing even the professor missed. No one heard her. Downstairs, she entered the storage room to reorganize the disheveled music sheets from last night's event. Most were torn, mislabeled, some crumpled under coffee mugs. She sorted them silently by composer, tempo, and century, more accurate than the music department's assistant, who'd been fired last month for losing a donor list. No one asked how Amira always seemed to know which version belonged to which ensemble. They just assumed she was guessing. A week later, she was asked to clean the recital hall at midnight. That night, the piano tuner had stayed late. The man noticed someone had adjusted the dampers and reweighted the hammers perfectly on one of the old Steinways. "Who's been in here?" he muttered. Amira, hidden behind the curtain, had already stepped away. She didn't need credit. Not anymore. Faculty like Dr. Huxley, the school's headmaster, passed her in corridors without so much as a nod. He once joked loudly, "I miss when janitors stayed invisible." The students laughed, though one, Gregory, their rising star pianist, caught her eye and gave a quick nod. She returned it and walked on. She'd seen his fingers tremble that morning, just slightly. No one else noticed. But Amira had once seen the same tremble on the hands of a child prodigy minutes before a televised performance. That child had been her. The teasing was constant, though always polite enough to deny if challenged. "Don't scratch the Bosendorfer next time," one professor had quipped after Amira cleaned the grand piano with gloved hands and a microfiber cloth. "It's not like your grocery store piano back home, darling." He chuckled and moved on, already forgetting she was standing there. She'd almost walked out that day. But then, that evening, she heard Gregory struggling with the opening movement of Liszt's transcription of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. He kept missing the inner voicings. She listened through the cracked door of the practice room. Without thinking, she traced the air with her fingers. A sharp pause. Gregory must have heard something. She backed away before he could see her. The next morning, Gregory ran into her near the vending machines. "Have you ever played?" he asked suddenly. She looked up, surprised. "You walk like a musician." "That probably sounds weird, sorry." She just smiled. "Once, a long time ago." He hesitated. "What do you think of Liszt's transcription of the Fifth?" "It's fire pretending to be thunder," she said softly. "But it has to breathe, or it dies." He blinked. "What?" "Nothing." She turned and left before he could ask more. Back in the staff lounge, no one greeted her. One of the professors left a used mug and napkin on the piano bench. Amira cleaned it in silence, then sat for a second. Just sat. Her fingers hovered over the keys, but didn't touch them. She heard music in her head, but didn't dare let it out. Not yet. It was only a matter of time before something cracked. The conservatory had spent the entire semester preparing for the Founders Gala, an event where students performed for prestigious donors in hopes of securing scholarships, investments, and future careers. Gregory had been chosen to close the show with Liszt's impossible piece. The entire faculty was banking on his performance. Donor seating was being arranged with military precision. The school was using Gregory like a medal. 3 days before the gala, Amira walked past his open practice room again. He was furious, muttering to himself, "Why won't it land? Why does it feel forced?" He slammed the keys, stood up, and threw his music on the floor. Amira gently stepped inside. "You're attacking it. Maybe listen to what it's trying to say first." He stared at her. "What?" She picked up the score, looked at it briefly, then handed it back. "It's not a war. It's a storm. You ride it or you drown." Gregory took it, wordless. She turned and left again. He never told anyone what she said, but the next day he played the passage better. Not perfect, but closer. And when the night of the gala arrived, no one could have guessed that 5 minutes before his performance, Gregory would collapse backstage, and that the only one willing to step forward was the woman no one ever noticed. Backstage descended into chaos the moment Gregory collapsed. 1 second he was tightening the cuffs on his jacket. The next he was doubled over on the bench, gasping for breath, his hands trembling violently. The headmaster froze. A flurry of teachers swarmed him. Someone shouted for water, another for a medic. Gregory tried to speak, but couldn't. His right hand curled like a claw. His face had gone white. "Panic attack," muttered Madame Celine, the stern vocal coach. "Too much pressure." "He's our closing act," barked Dr. Huxley, turning red. "We can't cancel. Not with the dancing donors in the audience. We promised them lists." "We need a replacement," someone said. "Who knows the piece?" another asked. Silence. No student had touched the transcription. It was known among the conservatory as a performance gauntlet, only given to the best of the best. And now, their golden boy was wheezing into a paper bag in wings, unable to lift his hands. Dr. Huxley's voice broke through the tension. "Celine, can we transpose something easier for Michaela? She's a mezzo-soprano." Madame Celine replied sharply. "You want her to perform Liszt piano work with her elbows?" "Violinist," someone else tried. "She's playing second violin on the chamber piece." And none of them are prepared. This isn't a sight-read moment. The back hall buzzed louder. On stage, the announcer stalled, speaking about legacy, the spirit of perseverance, the honor of performance, anything to buy time. One student whispered, "Why not just delay and explain it?" Dr. Huxley's eyes snapped. "Delay means weakness. Donors smell weakness." Amira stood in the corner by the mop sink, invisible in the way she'd trained herself to be, but her ears had caught every word, and her eyes were locked on the crumpled boy on the bench. His eyes were wide, terrified. His shoulders shook. She didn't decide. Her body moved before her mind did. "I know the piece," she said. It came out quiet, but in the sudden silence, it rang like thunder. Heads turned. First the assistant stage manager, then Celine, then Huxley. Every eye landed on the janitor, dressed in worn gray slacks, lanyard around her neck, clipboard still tucked under one arm. Huxley blinked as if trying to remember her name. "You what?" "I've played it before," she said, "multiple times." "You must be joking," Celine scoffed. "You mop rehearsal floors." "I can play," Amira repeated, firmer this time. "I know the Liszt transcription. Every bar." The headmaster chuckled, genuinely amused. "Let her try," he said sarcastically, glancing at the others. "We're already humiliated. Might as well let the cleaning lady finish the job." Someone laughed. A student tried to hide their smile. Celine didn't even pretend to hide her scorn. But Madame Du Bois, the piano theory professor who rarely spoke, was squinting at Amira now, not in dismissal, but recognition. Something in her expression shifted. A crease of thought, a memory sparked. "You've studied this piece?" Du Bois asked carefully. "Yes." "Where?" Amira didn't answer. Dr. Huxley had already turned his back. "Fine. Let her go. She'll butcher it. We'll say it was an improvisational piece, and I'll rewrite the program." "Shouldn't we at least hear her warm up?" someone offered nervously. "There's no time," Huxley growled. "If she fails quietly and we move on." The sheet music was thrust into her hands. She looked at it, but didn't need it. She hadn't needed it in years. Celine muttered under her breath, "This is going to be a train wreck." Du Bois, still watching Amira closely, asked one last question before they pushed her toward the stage. "What tempo will you take the Allegro in?" Amira smiled slightly. Whichever one the piano breathes in. Du Bois's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Behind the curtain, the stage manager adjusted the microphone and cleared his throat. Due to unforeseen circumstances, he began, our final performer will be a surprise selection. Please welcome tonight's closing act. Polite applause. On stage, the grand piano gleamed under the spotlight like a challenge. Amira stepped forward. She walked slower than usual, not out of fear, but respect. Her shoes were still dusty. Her shirt had a faint bleach stain on the sleeve. The piano bench creaked slightly as she adjusted it. Not a single person in the audience was truly watching her. To them, she was a delay, a novelty, a mistake, until her hands met the keys. And then nothing else mattered. Not the dust, not the donors, not the whispers. She drew one deep breath and played the first 4 notes. From the moment Amira struck the opening motif, those 4 thunderous notes transformed by Liz into a storm of arpeggios. The room shifted. The polite applause faded into stillness. The rustle of program stopped. Heads tilted, eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. She didn't just play the piece. She inhabited it. Her hands moved like silk, like lightning, like memory itself. The left hand pulsed through intricate octave runs, while the right hand flew across the upper register, layering emotion into each dynamic shift. She played not from her hands, but from something older, something earned. In the wings, Gregory sat up, eyes wide, the numbness in his fingers forgotten. She's not just good, he whispered. She's terrifying. In the front row, Dr. Huxley's smug expression had faltered. Madame Du Bois had stopped blinking altogether. Professor Celine sat with her mouth slightly open, clutching the edge of her seat. Amira continued unfazed. As the piece surged into the second movement, she leaned into the tension, teasing each phrase until the room felt like it was holding its breath with her. She took liberties no student dared, rubato where others stayed rigid, restraint where others blared. And yet, everything was exact, emotionally precise. The third movement hit with such ferocity that a donor audibly gasped. A man in a tuxedo dropped his wine program. Someone in the balcony whispered, "Who is she?" Then, halfway through the development section, something subtle happened. A hush like recognition. Madame Du Bois whispered first, her voice barely a breath. "No, it can't be." Professor Thornton, who had once called Amira that Syrian janitor, squinted through his opera glasses. That phrasing, my God. Amira al-Masri. Du Bois said, louder now. Heads turned. It rippled through the rows like fire. Amira al-Masri. The soul of Damascus. The girl who played Chopin with one hand after the bombing. The prodigy who vanished 5 years ago after Vienna. Now here she was, on their stage, in worn sneakers, and her fingers hadn't faltered once. Backstage, a crowd had gathered around the monitor. Students, staff, even catering crew. Gregory was still staring. "She told me it was a storm pretending to be fire," he muttered. She wasn't kidding. The climax of the piece approached. That impossible section with the repeated chords that turned lesser pianists into trembling wrecks. Amira didn't blink. Her wrists stayed loose. Her hands moved like they were remembering an old poem by heart. Even the piano seemed to respond. By now, the entire hall had leaned forward. A few students were crying. One donor had stopped breathing through his nose entirely. In the final measures, she didn't perform. She revealed everything she had kept buried since the war, since the accident, since she fled her country, her concert schedule, her fame, since she traded her stage gowns for rubber gloves and her applause for mop water. When the last chord landed, she didn't slam it. She let it breathe, soft but final, like the close of a prayer. And then silence. Real electric silence. A full 3 seconds passed before anyone could react. It was not disbelief that held them. It was reverence. Then the room exploded. The ovation came like a thunderclap. Students were on their feet. Donors shouted brava. Professors who had barely acknowledged her existence clapped with wild abandon. A few guests were wiping away tears. One man turned to his partner and said, "That's who we should have built this program around." Amira stood slowly, gave a small bow. Nothing showy, nothing self-important. She didn't need it. In the front row, Du Bois was crying openly. Huxley looked like he'd swallowed a stapler. Thornton took off his glasses, polished them, and put them back on, still blinking. The announcer returned to the stage with trembling hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the mic, I believe we've all just witnessed something extraordinary. Please allow me to reintroduce Miss Amira Al-Masri." A collective gasp rolled across the hall. The cameras zoomed in. Every journalist in the room reached for their phone. She bowed once more, not for the recognition, but for the music. She turned her head slightly toward the wings, where Gregory stood frozen, and gave him the smallest nod. Not pride, not arrogance, just permission. Then she walked off stage, not with swagger, but with the quiet grace of someone who never needed to prove anything, and finally stopped hiding. Backstage, the silence behind the curtain was just as deafening as the applause on the other side. Faculty who had once brushed past Amira like furniture now stepped aside, unsure whether to speak or simply stare. A few students clapped again as she passed, this time not mockingly, but reverently. Gregory stood with his mouth open, eyes shining. He looked as if he wanted to say something, but the words hadn't caught up yet. Before anyone could break the stunned silence, Dr. Huxley stormed in, his face caught somewhere between fury and panic. "Why didn't anyone tell me who she was?" he hissed, voice low, as though embarrassed to raise it. "You all let a world-class performer mop floors." Madame Du Bois, for once, didn't soften the truth. "You never asked," she said. He turned red. She lied on her application. She omitted. Du Bois corrected. "There's a difference." Professor Celine, flustered and breathless, tried to recover her dignity. "Well, clearly we must offer her something. Artist in residence, master teacher, anything before someone else does. She can't just leave now." "She might," Du Bois replied, still watching Amira with something close to admiration. "She doesn't need us." She never did. But Amira hadn't left. She stood quietly in the green room, sipping from a paper cup of water like she'd just run a marathon instead of shredded the hardest piano piece in the conservatory's archives. She didn't seem eager or proud or smug, just still. Gregory finally stepped forward. "I didn't know. I mean, what you told me about the waves, about breathing the piece, I thought it was just poetic." "It was," she said softly. "Poetry belongs in music, too." He hesitated. "Will you teach me?" She smiled. "Only if you promise to stop playing for applause." "I will," he said instantly. "I mean, I'll try." "Good," she said, "because if you're trying to impress this building, you'll be exhausted for life." The next day, the conservatory staff scrambled to issue statements. Journalists flooded the campus. "War refugee stunned conservatory," the headlines read. "Janitor turns piano hall into thunder." Donation soared. A few faculty suddenly discovered they'd always suspected something. By the week's end, Amira had been offered an official position, one crafted almost out of panic: resident master pianist and mentor to emerging talents. Her office was cleaned out, remodeled, and fitted with a new nameplate before she even said yes. She didn't say yes right away. She sat alone in the recital hall that Sunday evening, when no one else was around. No applause, no donors, just the piano under soft lights and the memory of who she used to be. She placed her fingers on the keys again. No pressure this time, no performance. And she played something else. A melody she'd written years ago during the war. Quiet, slow, for the children who used to listen in bomb shelters when she played by candlelight, for the family she'd lost, for the years she spent silent. When she finished, there were no standing ovations, no names whispered through shocked crowds, just peace. She smiled. On Monday, she accepted the position. By Friday, her master class was filled to capacity, with a waiting list long enough to form a second one. She chose Gregory as her first student and asked him to bring only one thing to his lesson: a piece he loved, not one that impressed others. Start there, she told him. The rest is just translation. Dr. Huxley, now painfully deferential, began referring to her as Professor Al-Masri in every faculty meeting, often with a nervous clearing of his throat beforehand. Thornton never dared call her Miss again. Only Madame Du Bois treated her exactly the same, with quiet respect, no groveling. One afternoon after class, Du Bois dropped off a stack of historical manuscripts. Thought you might enjoy reviewing the original French fingering notations, she said. You were right, by the way. It is more breathing than lightning. Amira nodded. Took me years to understand that. Du Bois smiled. Took me a janitor. In the months that followed, Amira transformed not only the music department, but its culture. She insisted that every student, regardless of background, be given a chance to perform one solo piece a semester. She rewrote the audition rubrics. She restructured mentorship so that no student was left wondering if they were invisible, but she still swept the green room after recitals, still tuned the pianos when the technician missed a week, still walked the same halls in quiet steps. One evening, Gregory approached her before his second performance. I'm not nervous, he said. Good, she replied. He paused. Do you think anyone like you ever walked these halls before and just never got the chance to show it? Amira looked around the concert hall, its chandeliers, its polished wood, its endless portraits of celebrated men. I don't know, she said. But now, no one's walking past unseen again. Not on my watch. And she meant it, because music had been her first language. And finally, someone was listening.